Grab your beverages and turn up your interweb. Solving the world's problems 12 ounces at a time. It's Dudes and Beer.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to episode 177 of the Dudes and Beer podcast. I am Chris Jordan, your host. With me tonight is Stephen Bishop.
What's up, listeners?
Holding on the line with us right now is our awesome guest. We have had him on before, Dr. John Hall out of San Antonio. Tonight we will be talking about his work at the Stem Cell Orthopedic Institute of Texas, exactly what their work is, also all of the great work that they do with stem cells, what stem cells are, what kind of stem cells they're working with, all kinds of stuff is what we're going to be talking about with Dr. John Hall, as well as his work in the field of electronic harassment. We will be getting to him right after we go through some of the news of the week. We, of course, go through and post all kinds of news on the Dudes and Beer Facebook group all the time, and some of the great stuff that we have posted this week has been just all over the place. Of course, there was the great story about the photo of love with the officer who was photographed breastfeeding a malnourished child. It was one of those, like, thank God we have images of police officers doing good things for a change. It was great. I just wanted to lead off with that awesome story there.
Yeah, that's a good one.
The New York Times came out saying Asia Argento, the hashtag #MeToo leader, paid a sexual assault accuser previously. Of course, one of the great announcements that came out this week was beyond a shadow of a doubt, water actually exists on the poles of the moon. Some of the latest data shows the fact that there is, well, it's been theorized for years, much like it was on Mars. They recently confirmed the fact that there is liquid water on Mars. And they just confirmed the fact that there's liquid water on the moon. So even if it's frozen, that's something that we can harvest, use, all kinds of stuff for bouncing off to Mars from the moon. An Iranian-backed sleeper cell of militants hibernating in the U.S. may be positioned for attack. That comes to us from the Washington Free Beacon. Of course, the fact that the missing young college student Molly Tibbetts' body was found, apparently murdered by an illegal alien, unfortunately. Cybersecurity is set to ramp up with the upcoming midterm elections. The Space Force is not at all new. The X-37B plane just spent a year in orbit, and that is a military space plane, folks, the X-37B.
Whoa.
That has been under testing previously.
One whole year.
It's spent up to 2 years in orbit previously. So these things are nothing new. Out of The Guardian, U.S. inmates stage nationwide prison labor strike over quote-unquote modern slavery. And then, of course, some of the awesome news out of science this week, which is why I contacted Dr. Hall to have him on, was an article out of The Conversation saying that aging in human cells had been successfully reversed in the lab for the first time. And with that, let's begin the conversation about genetics, genetic therapy, and stem cell therapy with Dr. John Hall of the Stem Cell Orthopedic Institute of Texas. How are you doing this evening, Dr. Hall?
Good to be back on with you.
Absolutely, man. Whenever I saw that article the other day, it was one of those like, man, I got to get him on. Number one, because I think it's really important for people to know as many articles as we post on Dudes and Beer about the opioid epidemic, things like that. A lot of those people are people that have had major surgery and stuff that start using these as pain maintenance after knee surgery, after hip surgery, back surgery.
But highly addictive.
And highly addictive. But there are therapies alternatively that you can use, such as stem cell therapy. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have Dr. John Hall on.
Great.
So let's begin the conversation, Dr. Hall, with the difference. Number one, what kind of stem cells are you working with there?
Well, and that's an important question, because I have had people call the clinic uptight that we may be using embryologic stem cells or cells that are harvested through Planned Parenthood or something like that. To be clear, the stem cells that we use for therapy are your own stem cells, and they come from marrow. Just to be clear for some of your listeners, when they start looking for stem cell therapy, they're going to come across a lot of claims from various stem cell clinics that they can use amniotic fluid, that they can use umbilical cord blood, adipose tissue, or marrow. Now, just to clear it up, the reason that we use marrow is those are easy to harvest. They're your own stem cells. They come from your body. They go back into your body. There are stem cells in adipose tissue, and they're going to see a lot online about that because it's cheap and easy to do. The problem is that to get those stem cells out of adipose or fat tissue, you have to add a chemical to detergent to actually melt away the fat, break down the stroma, the fibrous tissue, and the fat to get to the stem cells.
Okay.
For one, that kills the stem cells. And for two, the minute you mix a chemical with that, it becomes a drug in the eyes of the government and not a biologic, and is under a whole separate set of guidelines. So that's really not the best way to do it. Umbilical cord blood has stem cells in it. If you've collected that from your child or yourself, you can't use someone else's. And of course, amniotic fluid is being touted as stem cells, which there's no stem cells in amniotic fluid. There's growth factors, but that's about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a great distinction, and a very important distinction, especially in this day and age, because a lot of people immediately go to the horror stories that they've heard online,
right?
Things like that, of
the dumpsters in the back of Child Parenthood,
all kinds of stuff. So to know that you're actively using somebody's own stem cells from inside of their bone marrow, and a lot of people don't even realize that your body continues to make stem cells. I mean, that's where your blood comes from, is from your bone marrow.
See, I wasn't aware that you still produce it while you're, going through life, I guess, right?
Yeah. And
your stem cells from your marrow, no matter what your age, are perfectly fine. And that's what we have, a centrifuge system that, based on molecular weight, separates out the plasma, the platelets, the red cells, and the stem cells. And then we mix the stem cells with the platelets and the plasma, and that's what gets injected. Like if you're in for arthritis of the knee, arthritis of the shoulder, torn ligaments, certain back conditions. If you have degenerative disc in the back, we can use them there. Now, the other thing I would like to say, you're going to be seeing a lot on using it for autism, using it for ALS, or for multiple sclerosis. In Texas, they recently did pass a law where we can use stem cells for multiple sclerosis now, as long as it's under an IRB, institutional review board, which means it's being done experimentally that way. It's coming along the same way for ALS. As you know, that's Lou Gehrig's disease. There's really no good treatment for it. I think stem cells are going to probably be the answer there, but just be leery for any listeners that are shopping for stem cell therapy. If they're really making outlandish claims, it's probably not true. There is a road. Like, let's say if you came in for an arthritic knee, you're having knee pain. Well, there's a road that you have to take before you do the stem cell therapy, and there's some therapy you have to do afterwards. It's not a miracle shot. You don't come in, get it, and then you live happily ever after. Depending on how bad off you are, we may brace you for a little while to increase blood flow. There's supplements we may put you on to increase blood flow to the joint. Then the injection, then some therapy, and then some rest. I mean, because I do a lot of work with professional athletes and bodybuilders, and it's a road. I mean, they don't come in, get a shot, and I don't put them on the field the next week. I put them on the field maybe 2 months later, after they've had time to regenerate, have time to actually heal the joint. So,
well, and what are some of the steps that somebody exploring this as a treatment, because it's fantastic there's been a lot of research done in the field of osteoporosis, arthritis, of course, things like that. What does somebody have to do? What are the treatments that they need to basically exhaust medically before this is considered viable for them?
Well, for one, I mean, like for joints, you can always try with basic steroid injections if you're not too bad off. I know before I will treat anyone in a hip, a shoulder, or anything like that, or a knee, I prefer to see an MRI. A lot of clinics aren't even doing that. They're shooting an X-ray and going, yeah, you got some arthritis. Let's do stem cells on it. Well, I mean, if most of your cartilage is there and your joint height is good, you may not need to spend the money on stem cells. You may just need an anti-inflammatory and maybe a steroid injection. There's kind of a sweet spot. You don't want to wait till you have zero cartilage in your bone on bone, because it's still not a miracle shot. If you're completely bone on bone and there's no cartilage there, there's nothing to regenerate.
Yeah.
Part of the way that they think stem cells and PRP, platelet-rich plasma, works is kind of by resetting the internal condition of the joint humeral aspects to basically make regeneration possible. Of course, the stem cells do get in there and do regeneration, but it biochemically, biologically changes the inside of the joint to allow for regeneration. So, and that's why it's time-consuming even after the injection. Anybody that's saying we can bring you in, we can do one injection, there's no follow-up, no therapy afterwards, they're really kind of just doing you a disservice, because that's not the way it's properly done. So.
Well, yeah. I mean, hopefully, and unfortunately, a lot of people do buy into the snake oil concept. They do think that there is either a miracle pill that they can take, some kind of miracle procedure that will just cure everything.
I
and
think a lot of times it's the way that it's false advertised. I think.
Well, sure. And I guess,
and to give you a point on that is, I turn away probably more stem cell cases than I do, because a lot of people just get to me too late. And I mean, if I think that knee needs to be replaced or that hip needs to be replaced, and you can do that on your insurance, for maybe just your copay, then that's definitely the route you should be going, not spending a lot of cash on stem cell therapy. And that's another point, is insurances don't cover it just yet.
Yep.
So it typically is a cash thing. In my clinic, we have got it down to about the bare bones where I think most people can probably afford it. It used to be about $10,000 to be able to do one or two joints, like say both knees.
Okay.
We've got that down to about $4,800 to do two joints. We get enough product to do two joints.
Wow, that's great.
But like I said, I've had people come in and go, well, I want you to try it anyway, because I don't want to have surgery. And I'm like, it's not going to work. You just have to kind of tell those people it will not work. You're too far gone. You need a joint replacement. And that's where it, is important to find somebody that's an honest practitioner, and not just go to the clinic with it, has the biggest banner online or,
Right.
And actually in our website, if you go through it, we have patient testimonials, we have articles on the science, we have introductions to the people, myself included, they're actually doing the therapy. And that's important, because it's not a magic bullet. It has a failure rate just like everything else in medicine.
Sure.
Some people do well, some people fail. I've had failure.
What is that failure rate, John?
About 20 to 30%. We have about a 65 to 70% success rate.
Not bad.
With it, which, well, in the medical world, believe it, that's not bad, because there's, you can go and have a knee or a hip replaced and still have pain afterwards, and then you're still seeing me for medication or for shots anyway.
And then come out with partial mobility. The fact is, most of the time, whenever you go in and have a joint replaced, you're only going to come out with a certain percentage of that original mobility to begin with. And that's of course something to be considered. Now, explain to us a little bit of the science that actually is there. What is the process? What does the marrow go through in order to become a stem cell injection? How does that?
Well, what we do is we bring you in, and like I said, most people, I usually put on a supplement, nitric oxide supplement, to increase blood flow to the affected joint. We get MRIs, we get X-rays. All of that usually can be done on your insurance, so that's not much cash out of your pocket to get the preliminaries done. And then once we decide that you are going to be a candidate, like I said, we put you on nitric oxide, increase blood flow, get you in, give you some sedation. It's all done under IV sedation in the office. You don't have to go to the hospital to do it. It's not a multi-day procedure.
Okay.
And we numb up the area behind the iliac crest while you're under sedation. That's kind of the posterior, the hip bone toward the back. And you put in what's called a Jamshidi needle, which is a big needle. And it sounds like a gruesome procedure, but no one complains of pain there. We numb you up pretty good. And we draw marrow. And then there's a special centrifuge system that we use that it's not just a test tube and a spinner like you may be thinking. It's a multi-chambered cartridge that actually separates out all the different cells in the plasma based on molecular weight as it spins. Takes about 20 minutes to do the spin. Then you'll get your stem cells, your platelets, your red blood cells, and your plasma separated out. The red blood cells we discard because they don't actually do anything with regeneration. Then we mix your plasma with your platelets. The platelets actually adhere to the damage, bring in your body's own stem cell cascade. That's how PRP works, which is we do offer just PRP in addition to stem cells. And then the stem cells are collected, mixed with the PRP, and then injected under ultrasound in the joint. That's another important factor. If you're looking at clinics for stem cell therapy, make certain that they're doing those injections under ultrasound or under some sort of fluoroscopy. You don't want to spend a lot of money to have somebody draw your marrow or get your stem cells and then just blindly inject them into a knee. And I know there's plenty of physicians out there, orthopedists, who say, well, I know the anatomy well enough where I know where to put that needle to get in the joint.
Yeah.
Without ultrasound or fluoroscopy, even in the best hands of an orthopedic surgeon, injections are wrong in the wrong spot about 40% of the time. So you want to make sure if you're spending that money that your practitioner is actually doing those injections under ultrasound so they know where the product is going for sure.
Okay. Oh, sorry about that. Now, whenever you're talking about stem cell therapy, going through something like that, how long is it before people normally see results within that range of success?
Well, I'll tell you, initially, there's no pain where we draw the marrow. That sounds like the most gruesome thing. Nobody complains of that. You can't mix local anesthetic with the biologic product that goes into the joint. All of our local anesthetics are cellular toxic, believe it or not. So they'll kill the cells that you're trying to grow. So that is the painful part of the whole procedure. When we put those stem cells into your knee or your hip, there is some discomfort with that. We usually send you home with a mild opioid for pain for that. And then over the course of the following week, most of the joint pain starts to dissipate pretty rapidly. The pain goes away first before you have any type of regenerative changes in the joint. Then we see you back in a month. You do need 48 hours of downtime after the injection. That means you can get up and down to go to the bathroom, and that's about it. And that's to allow the platelets and the stem cells to bind to the damaged cartilage. After 2 days, we let you do daily living activity, walking. We see you back in another month. We re-ultrasound you, re-x-ray you, see what changes are there, make sure that you are not having any discomfort, that there's no swelling, no possibility of infection. And then the following month, we put you in aquatic therapy where there's gravity off of the joint if it's a knee or a hip, 3 times a week. And that's, again, just to foster blood flow in the joint. And if it's a knee, depending on the way your knee, if it's crooked to the inside, or you have, what we call medial tilt because the medial compartment of the knee is degenerated, I'll also put you in a brace that actually straightens out the knee. The whole point after the stem cell injection is to make sure there's blood flow in the joint so those cells have a blood source to continue to survive and regenerate.
Wow. And that technology is absolutely amazing. The fact that we have figured out not necessarily how to trick our biology, but how to use its natural processes to the utmost. Right. And we actually had a question that came in from a listener. He was asking why so many pro athletes are going to Europe for stem cell treatment and why U.S. doctors are so slow to adopt such therapies here.
Well, I think that probably used to be the case. In the last few years, I mean, probably not, because I know I do a fair share of professional athletes and professional bodybuilders. It's a little different ball game with those guys. They know they're going to be tearing themselves up again. So it's one of those things where you kind of tune them up, and they play another season and they tear something else, and then you fix it and they tear something else. But most of the stuff that he's right. A decade ago, I mean, most people were going to Germany for. I know in my clinic we've been doing stem cells and PRP now for probably 5 to 6 years, and have our share of athletes that come to us. But the reason they come is not necessarily for the stem cell injection itself, but is for the continuum of care that we provide.
Sure.
To make sure that it works, because like I said, if you're going to a clinic where they're going, oh, come in, we're going to do you, or if they're trying to sell you multiple injections, that's another thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes you do need a second injection of PRP or stem cells, but it's pretty rare. So if they're telling you, well, you need to buy a package of 3 stem cell injections, or even worse, I've even seen clinics here in Texas that are using some product that's a freeze-dried stem cell, they call it, or they're doing straight amniotic fluid injections and calling it stem cells. Yeah. And there's a company here that's charging $10,000 per joint.
Oh, wow.
To do amniotic fluid-based stem cells. Well, there's no stem cells in amniotic fluid. That's the water around the baby, and it's harvested and from pooled donors from typically abortion clinics or hospitals, and you don't know what the disease risk is really.
Ooh,
and there's no stem cells in it, so you're not getting stem cells.
And that's total false advertising.
The two verifiable ways to get stem cells are adipose and marrow. There's not an efficient way to get enough stem cells, in my mind, to do any good from adipose. I think you're mostly getting a fat slurry or a fat graft. And if you're doing that for a knee, then you might as well do Synvisc, the rooster cone gelatin, because it's mostly working as a shock absorber, not a regenerative therapy. So, but yeah, we're doing a lot of athletes now, and we've tried to get the price down to where it's available for most folks to actually enjoy this therapy as well. So,
well, and it's just incredible the work that y'all have done. How many people would you say that y'all see in a month there at the clinic?
Hard to say. I mean, I see 30 to 40 people a day. Not all of those are stem cell therapy people, but we're probably. I offhand guess would probably be 20 or 30 probably cases a month. So,
wow.
And of either stem cell or PRP. Now, another option that just for the listeners that are listening, PRP is considerably cheaper than doing stem cells. That stands for platelet-rich plasma. And if your knee cartilage or your hip cartilage or your shoulder tear is a partial tear, or most of your cartilage is there, but it's getting a little beaten up, well, the way PRP works is you just draw blood, separate the platelets out with the plasma, and you inject that. The platelets will adhere to the damage and bring your body's own stem cell cascade in to do the repair.
Oh, wow.
And that is certainly a much affordable option for a lot of my patients that come to me. They're all excited about stem cells. I do their MRIs and go, you know what, your knee's not that bad. Let's just do PRP. That costs about $1,000 to do, as opposed to $4,800 or $5,000.
Right.
And I think, and you'll get to the same place. I mean, stem cells do heal you a little bit quicker because you're concentrating the cells that actually do the regeneration. But PRP will get you there. And if you're 65 years old and you got, mild to moderate osteoarthritis and most of your cartilage is there, I usually try to convince my patients to go with PRP. It saves them some money and it gets them the same result.
And that's just phenomenal. The fact that, like I said, that we have figured out a way to make our body do this. And one of the reasons that I called you, I want to kind of start moving into the realm of future stem cell therapy, where some of these technologies may be going right now, Doctor. Because, like I said, there was just the lab result that came out this last week saying that
reverse aging cells.
That they'd actually halted the aging process in cells for the first time,
Halt.
and just to, or no, reversed. Yeah, actively reversed the aging process in human cells, and I'm sure that is still to be duplicated in lab results, all kinds of stuff, before it becomes any kind of therapy or available in any kind of way. But where do you see technology like this and stem cell therapies crossing?
I think stem cells are going to be the wave of the future as far as basically healing a lot of different issues. Like I said, we're already using it for MS, which has, I think just about every one of your listeners, including all three of us, either know somebody or have a family member or know somebody with a family member suffering from MS, multiple sclerosis. And there's really no good treatment for it right now, pharmaceutical. ALS is another one, Lou Gehrig's disease. So some of the technological things coming down the pike are actually taking those stem cells and actually genetically altering them to immediately become the progenitor cells for, let's say, motor tract cells or neurons in the spinal cord or neurons in the brain. There have already been some use for people with stroke, actually putting them in the spinal fluid around the brain to repair parts of brain that have suffered from stroke. We're already using it in MS. They're starting to use it overseas in ALS. I think that's going to be soon here in the States. And that's where altering those cells is going to be important, because they do work straight out of the marrow for some of those disorders pretty well, but they'll work really well if you can actually harvest those cells, expand them, which essentially is the medical term for sending them off to a lab to be grown, altered genetically to immediately become neurons, and then you send back a collection of the cells that have been already genetically altered to become specifically the cell you need it to become, and then you inject it and to regenerate the parts of the spine that are damaged in multiple sclerosis of the brain and multiple sclerosis or ALS. Now, there are some people using it overseas for autism. The true research on using it for autism has been, kind of lukewarm. It's even for us physicians, sometimes it's hard to really pick apart the research to see what's legit and what's not. Autism's kind of a multifactorial problem. They're not even sure what causes it, so how to treat it. But there have been some good anecdotal results, and anecdotal means somebody took their child to Venezuela or to Costa Rica, they had stem cells, and they appear to be a little better. It's not really universally studied, but they are going there and coming back. And that's one of the reasons we're real excited to eventually start doing MS, because we have a lot of MS sufferers here. It does work in MS. People have been going overseas and spending 30, 40, 50 grand to get treatment for their MS, when hopefully here soon we'll be able to provide that same care, hopefully a better sterile environment, and do it for a tenth of the price.
Well, and how far, as a physician in this realm and somebody who takes part in studies, things like that, how far down the line do you think this technology is? How far do you think it'll be until we see MS treatments, things like that, as regularly as we still see orthopedic stem cell treatments?
I think probably in the next 5 years. Texas recently did pass regulations where it can be used for MS. Right now, it has to be done under a research guideline, which I think was a good idea for the state to do that, because if you look online, there's a lot of really sham stem cell therapy companies popping up all over the place online that a lot of them aren't even run by physicians. It's owned by a businessman who hires some family doctors or residents and kind of teaches them where to put the needle. It's not, there's no quality control to it. So it's probably good that there's some regulations coming. And that's actually what they've been doing. The government has been doing that with adipose or fat graft-based stem cells. They jumped in and said, you know what, all these companies are jumping up where somebody goes in, takes a little bit of your fat out of your love handle, squishes it up with some saline, and then injects it into a joint and calls it stem cells.
Yeah.
Well, the only way to get those stem cells out of fat, like I said, is to detergent the fat. And once you do that, then what you've got left is a drug, not a biologic, and it's under different guidelines. So, but the technology that's coming ahead of us with stem cell therapy is going to be boundless, because you can take those cells and expand them and alter them genetically to be whatever you need them to be. Now, that being said, that also opens a door to a lot of untoward type research as well. So that's where I think it's, as much as I would ordinarily be against a lot of government regulation in this field, I think I'm actually for as much regulation as the government wants to put down, because I think it's going to protect patients in the long run. So
I would tend to agree with you on that point. We've had numerous conversations off air, even on air, about such things, and we're both pretty much along the same line as far as technologies that are invasive to us, technologies that are even made by the government, even made by future technology companies, people that are, dabbling in things like cybernetic technology, dabbling in things like exoskeletons for military, even Google here recently coming out and admitting the fact that it was working on the AI for the new Pentagon drones. And that caused a huge stir inside Google. Like people started leaving their programming team en masse.
You know what I call Google? Skynet.
Well, may as well.
Another quick thing for your listeners: anybody that is looking at stem cell therapy, we started about 2 years ago. We started a stem cell ethics consortium, and if you Google that, just consortium on stem cell ethics.
Okay,
it's based out of Austin, and you'll see a list of providers come up that are heavily scrutinized to make sure that they're doing the ethical thing with their patients and actually doing correct stem cell work. And if the doctor you're looking at is on that list, you're probably in pretty good shape, because if you sign up to be in the consortium, I was one of the originators of it, and you send us all your data on exactly what your technique is, how you're doing it, how you're advertising, what you're charging, we will hold you to that. If anybody goes to the dark side that's a member of that consortium, we'll be the ones that hammer it. We're not going to wait for the government to do it. So,
nice.
The consortium on stem cell ethics. So.
Okay, and that's something great to check out. While people are online checking that out, where can they go to check out more about the Stem Cell Orthopedic Institute of Texas?
Right there, Stem Cell Orthopedic Institute of Texas.com. And we have patient testimonials, we have research papers, we have our own research that we've done on outcomes based on our own patient population there. And I think it's a pretty busy website, but if you wade through it, you'll probably find your answer there somewhere. Okay. And our number at the office is 210-614-6432. So.
Fantastic. And while we have you on the line, there is, of course, been one of your other realms of expertise is the realm of digital harassment, the realm of using technologies, specifically frequency technologies, electromagnetic fields, things like that,
I like where this is going.
Influence people, be it positive or negative. And one of the things we were talking about before air, I recently reposted it because after we confirmed our show, it just popped in my head like, man, I remember a few years ago a company coming out with nanodust, literally dust-sized particles
that are machines
that were like nano computers that were able to be GPS located, GPS controlled,
and they reproduce on their own, don't they?
No, I didn't see that they reproduce. No, they aren't to that point. But it was amazing the fact that here's something the size of particles of dust that somebody could just throw in the air, and you could inhale, or could be put on clothing, all kinds of things, and. If
sprayed in the air like with the big old jet plane.
Well, it's the fact of if these things can be pinged with a satellite, and they're that small.
Wow.
They were literally talking about it being the future of mind control, and the article was in Forbes magazine.
Oh, geez. See?
I'm not even crazy.
People
folks.
totally skip that.
I wish it was the fact that I was, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on. Also, is because there have been so many updates going on lately about here we go, how smart desks can be used to monitor human thought.
There it is, Forbes magazine.
This is from Brown University, a study that came out in 2013. So this was 5 years ago. This was July of 2013 that this was released.
Oh, by now they can reproduce.
Well, and you do have to kind of.
And it does exist.
Yeah, no, like it's a thing. It's out there.
Jeez, you don't even know you snorted that.
Yeah, you have no idea if you've inhaled it.
Right.
You have no idea if it's on your clothing.
Odorless.
Now,
nothing.
What are some of the updates going on lately in the world of electronic harassment? I know that there have been a couple more cases out of China with people at the embassy, stuff like that. But it's just wild to me, all of the news of new satellites going up from China, all that kind of stuff. The new worry about the new Russian satellite going up. Just all kinds of things.
No. Well, an interesting thing did happen. I actually had one of the people from the Cuban embassy reach out to me.
Oh, wow.
We've been in some talks, and it was just as I had figured. I was on a couple of other radio shows where I was asked about that when they were initially saying that it was sonic weapons that these people were being attacked with. And at the time, this was right when it happened. I said, sonic weapons won't do that. This is going to be electromagnetic all the way. And sure enough, one of the victims from the Cuban embassy did tell me that she was hearing voices, that it started off as tinnitus, and it followed all the patterns that we see with targeted individuals. A hum in the room, or force in the room that was repressive, and then she could hear the voices of the people that were actually tormenting her. And the ironic thing is that all of these people have had a gag order placed on them, which is why you haven't heard much out of them. They're only allowed to talk to their family members and to the doctors at the University of Pennsylvania that are actually doing the research. So, but it is electromagnetic targeting that's happening there.
And
that's interesting.
Well, and how does that technology actively work? Because so many people, number one, don't realize that. And whenever we had you on a few months ago, as these things were hitting the airwaves about the Cuban attacks, right as China happened, I remember like 2 days after we had our live episode, I remember texting you the article like, oh my God, look, here it is happening in China. And it's happened a couple times more since then.
It's dudes and beer for you.
And it's odd that this technology exists to be able to literally resonate somebody's skull electromagnetically with simple vibrations and cause them to hear a voice that you transmit on that frequency. How does that technology work?
It's done by brainwave entrainment mostly, and they have figured out the right spectrums of the electromagnetic spectrum to beam at someone's head in low frequencies where your brain will actually entrain that frequency and then start to actually basically display the symptom that you're wanting to display. It's been done for a long time. Some of the earliest complaints of this were actually from some prisoners at the Utah State Prison. This would have been late 70s, early 80s, where they specifically mentioned that hearing a voice in their heads as they were being experimented on that was very uniquely responding to their thoughts without them communicating with words. So this has been in the works for a long time. It's actually been perfected pretty well. I think it's being used on the public in general. And one interesting thing with the whole Cuban debacle is it was one of the American citizens that I talked to, but the Canadian government seems to be actually, at least, on the cover of things seems to be taking this a lot more seriously in the press.
Oh, they're on
than our
point with it.
government. I mean,
They're on point
Yeah,
with it. They're
yeah.
like, we need to send we need to send investigators. We need to figure out what kind of weaponry is being used to attack people. Like they're all
Well,
over.
for your
Wow,
listeners,
that's what I'm saying.
For your listeners, I would like to introduce Stephen Shellen.
Oh yeah, absolutely, please.
I've got him on with us, and he's in Canada. He's a Canadian citizen. And Stephen, I mean, you think they're taking it a little more seriously up there with the targeting?
No, it's the same here. And when you start looking into, oh, hi, by the way.
Hey.
Yeah, when you start looking into Canada and what went on in military bases in Canada with MK Ultra, and Canada's per population, I would say that Canada probably had more victims of MK Ultra per population. I'm not saying.
Oh no, absolutely. Those were where a lot of the stories of them
that went on in Canada.
Yeah,
there was a lot of. I've got a friend who actually was involved in that in a base just right next to the Arctic, and she had young Native girls, 5, 6 years old. They were dead, hanging next to her. She recovered that memory recently, and she's been targeted in the most extreme way you can't even imagine.
Yeah.
But she's really delved into Canadian bases and how much experimentation went on here. So yeah, Canada might, on some level, pose as doing something. But my ex-partner in a production company, he was a lawyer, and his father, he claimed, ran CSIS, which is like Canada's CIA.
Oh, wow.
And he basically told me to keep my mouth shut about my kids or I was dead, and that we never had a production company. And that's kind of what started me. That was in 1996.
Well,
and that was kind of that was the beginnings for me.
Well, and if you don't mind, share with our audience and with us as well. Number one, welcome to the show, Stephen Shellen, actor out of Canadiana up there.
Yeah,
the people who kicked my people out.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm a Cajun,
living in an igloo.
So that's it.
In an igloo.
And a ginger.
And so, explain to us how you came to be familiar with the concept of electronic harassment, and how you came involved with that movement, Stephen.
Yeah, I'll try to make it quick. I always say that, John, and I never do. But I
don't worry about quick, man. Don't worry about quick. Stories like these are literally about the details, so feel free.
So in 1995, I'd co-starred in a movie with Brad Pitt, and I'd done about 30 or 40 films.
Yeah, River Runs Through.
I was
little film
movies, reading scripts, and I had a pretty good career. And I wanted to start a production company. I'd sold my house in Los Angeles. And I bought an old 1850 farmhouse with like 20 acres, like a gentleman's farm essentially. And I wanted to raise my kids in a safe, normal atmosphere as opposed to Hollywood.
Sure.
So I moved my family to Canada, and my daughter was born on our farm. My son had been born on a river runs through it with a midwife, and I was just basically living my life. I have one previous son from a short-lived relationship in Los Angeles that cost me a damn fortune, and it was my first introduction to any, false accusations and all that stuff. But I figured I'll get through it, and I did,
Sure.
But I paid a lot in lawyer fees. That was the worst part in California, child support law. Anyway, so I'm living on the farm, and then I came home one day unexpectedly, and my wife at the time had bruises on her face, and then my 4-year-old son told me about men hitting mommy, and then she admitted to being a prostitute, which was obscene at the time because I was making pretty good money. There was no reason for her to be a prostitute, certainly. Then that's when the following and the harassment and all that stuff started. I was thrown in a movie with Lorraine Bracco. I don't know if you know her.
Oh,
She
absolutely.
was in, The Soprano. She played the psychiatrist, right?
Absolutely. She plays the wife in Goodfellas.
Yeah, that's it. That's Lorraine Bracco.
Yeah.
So I'm in France. It's about 2 weeks after my son has been threatened to be hurt if he talked to me.
Wow.
And thank God at the time I had the semblance of I had the sense to put my son on tape. I bought a microcassette recorder, and I recorded my 4-year-old son where he was crying, telling me he wasn't allowed to talk to me or the man was going to hurt him. And I hung on to that tape. Even while doing that film, I never let that tape out of my possession.
Wow.
The microcassette tape. I made about 300 or 400 copies of that original microcassette tape. Honestly, this sounds absurd. I've had safety box break-ins. I've had storage break-ins. Friends' homes have been broken into. Every single tape, every copy I made, and it must have been over 300 copies, they all got stolen. So somebody was obviously after that tape. Plus, at that same time, and this is where it gets confusing, I was starting a company out of Vancouver with this guy, John Hardy, who claimed his father ran CSIS. Well, this guy, John Hardy, worked with many people inside the Vancouver Stock Exchange. He was basically an insurance lawyer. So if a bridge falls down, on a mine, John Hardy would hire people, and they would try to prove that the engineer was an alcoholic. They take they try to clear the responsibility of this disaster from the owners of the mine.
Mitigate liability.
Anyway, John Hardy was my partner. I knew nothing about CSIS really at the time, and he wanted to call the company Lionsgate. So that was probably the beginnings of Lionsgate.
Oh, wow.
Oh, my God.
As far as I know. And John Hardy was friends with this guy, Frank Giustra, from the Vancouver Stock Exchange, or at least I believe they were friends, because that's who he dealt with. Mining companies, guys from the Vancouver Stock Exchange. And I mean, that criteria, who fits it? Well, Frank Giustra certainly does, because he made, billions of dollars off of penny ante stock on the Vancouver Stock Exchange, which they eventually closed down because it was so corrupt.
Yeah.
Anyway, all of a sudden, after my son's confession to me and all the copies started disappearing, I'm thrown in the movie with Lorraine Bracco, and I find myself being tracked, followed, death threatened, harassed. And this is all while I'm trying to do this film in France, because I got shipped off to France. And plus, at the last minute, they sprung it on me that I had to speak French, which I didn't speak at the time. So I'm having to phonetically memorize French and try to be like the co-star in this horrible movie with Lorraine Bracco. So, that was the closest I think I ever got to suicide. I was so distraught during that, because I'd never been followed. I'd never had death threats. I'd never had this gaslighting stuff where they knock on your door, there's no one there, and they hypersensitize you to things like marbles in a sink. And it doesn't sound like much, but if every hotel you go to, and after an hour or two, you're trying to go to sleep, and you hear marbles in a sink.
Yeah, just spinning around on porcelain.
Fine.
It's annoying as fuck.
Consecutively, every hotel you go to, you're like, who the hell's putting marbles in? It sounds like their bathroom sink. And why are they following me around? So it's targeting is not just, the red car driving by your house.
Yeah.
And I get really infuriated with targets that say that, only because unless you explain that you're getting sensitized to this, it doesn't really, the average person doesn't understand how that could be a trigger, how that could be upsetting for you.
Yeah.
Because most rational people, including myself before all this happened, I'd say, well, confront them, or who cares? It's a red car. But it's the frequency with which they do it, and that's really kind of what targeting is. And obviously, someone's designed it, and they know what they're doing. So
and it will increase actually break-ins. And I mean, before my books came out, they were breaking into my house, they were breaking into my car, they were filing false reports with the medical board. I mean, there was all kinds of stuff that went on, which is really what propelled me to write the book, along with them actually targeting my fiance. So,
well, I know your story. It's horrific.
And this
for
sounds
me anyway,
no less horrific, especially whenever somebody threatens your children.
Now. Yeah, well, my children are threatened and stolen, and then I'm treated like a piece of garbage when I'd once been, I was never a big star, and I was never really that interested in being a huge star, but I was a working actor, and I was considered good at what I did.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, all my friends are falling away from me. My family disowned me. And, it's very shocking back in 95, 96 to go through this.
Wow.
And during that time frame, I also met this guy, Ted Gunderson. And Ted, some people say, he wasn't a good guy and things. Well, as far as my personal experience with Ted Gunderson, he was invaluable to me because when I went to see him, I was like pretty paranoid and wound up about what I was living through.
Sure.
And, he was chuckling and finishing my sentences for me. And at least it was someone that understood that this was happening. Like he didn't say it's not happening. He completely confirmed it and said I was put on the list. So
and
for me, Ted Gunderson was,
hey, Steve,
he was invaluable.
In case they don't know who Ted Gunderson was, Ted Gunderson came out against targeting later on in life. He was the bureau chief of the FBI in L.A.
Yes.
Right.
And now,
I'm familiar.
A minute ago, you were talking about how your children were taken. That being a sensitive subject, is that something that you're willing to talk about at this point?
Oh, sure. I never got them back. I was so heavily targeted. I ended up homeless within a year and a half.
Wow.
Lionsgate was certainly no longer my production company.
Yeah.
All my screenplays, all my treatments were all stolen. And
this is all on the crest of like the release of a huge movie. I mean, when I remember when A River Runs Through It came out, that was like the return of Robert Redford to the cinematic scene. That was a breakout performance for both you and Brad Pitt, where it really launched both of you.
In fairness, The River Runs Through It came out, I think, in '92.
Okay, yeah.
So this was 3 years following that. And River Runs Through It was instrumental or really helpful for me to raise venture capitalist money for my production company because, I'm the guy from River Runs Through It. I've done all these other films. I've co-directed a film at that point that Harvey Weinstein executive produced. I look pretty good on paper. So, all I was trying to do was do a kind of small arty production company. Never had any designs of, what Lionsgate is morphed into. I just wanted to do, cool little projects and maybe go to festivals and buy up interesting, low budget films with a Nick Nolte or a Willem Dafoe in it. Those were my objective was not to make, huge blockbusters like Hunger Games or any of that stuff, right?
Yeah. So,
my partner screwed me. I don't know what his involvement was, but he told me in '96, and that's a long-winded story, but he obviously had people on the lookout. And I met him in an opened area, like, what do they call, like a kiosk in a mall with 5-6 floors tiered up. And he kept glancing around up at these different levels. So I'm assuming he had people looking out for him.
Yeah, that's what that means.
He'd seen me like in a... Yeah, well, he knew me when he came to visit me in California before I bought my nice house, and I lived in Venice Beach, and he knew me as a guy that, if someone's beating up their girlfriend on the Venice Beach, I'm the first guy that's going to jump in, So he knew I wasn't afraid. So he was very guarded and nervous, and then he told me to keep your mouth shut about your kids or you're dead. And then he picked up his briefcase and walked off. And quite honestly, and not many targets talk about this because people that aren't targeted will say, well, why didn't you grab them, or why didn't you run after them, or why didn't you? When you're,
because I'd be dead.
It's a psychological operation, and when you're that broken, and your family, your friends, your business associates, everything's crumbling around you. And I've never really cared prior to this what people thought of me. I'm pretty open. I was anyway, pretty confident. But when you find your whole support, falling apart around you, you're so devastated. It's almost like you're punch drunk or something.
Yeah.
I don't know how to even,
Well, especially
you
once
don't
that.
do what you might normally do. So when he told me, keep your mouth shut about your kids or you're dead, and then he picked up his briefcase and walked off, I just sat there like literally stunned. Like, what do my children have to do with this? But then later, my ex-wife, it turns out, she had dissociative identity disorder, which used to be called multiple personality disorder.
Yep.
And because of 23 years now, I've come to the realization that, and she had serious abuse in her family with her politician father and his friends. So yeah, I can safely say, I wouldn't say 100%, but I got about a 99.9%, certification, let's say, that she was came from a generational abuse family, like a satanic ritual abuse family. But I didn't know any of this at the time. Yeah, so so my life unfortunately overlaps not just from targeting, but I've also been a strong advocate for ritual abuse victims and people believing them.
Well, and
Stephen and
that
I
was essentially what happened. I can't remember what the initial question was, but that's, my kids are taken. I end up homeless. I lived on the streets for about 3 years in Los Angeles. And then I thought, well, what job can I do and get paid? Like, what could I possibly do? And all work was, as soon as they ran my Social Security, I'd go back the next day to start the job. We can't hire you. Why? And then the manager runs into the back into his office and locks the door. And you walk and you knock on the door, but you've sort of now been conditioned to, oh, this is another one of these weird things, right?
Yeah.
So the guy won't open the door, and he just yells through the door, hey, you better leave or we're going to call the police.
Damn.
And all you're doing is showing up for a potential job as a salesman at a Gap clothing store because nothing else is available to you at the time. You get it? Like, it's absurd, but you're now conditioned to this weird stuff, so you're like, oh, okay. Yeah. It's another one of these things. I guess I can't get a regular job. So that's when I reinvented myself as a visual artist. So I thought, well, as an artist, if everyone thinks I'm completely bonkers and crazy, well, they're still going to buy my art.
That's just a state of being.
Anything they want to say anything about me, but.
And that is how my path and Stephen's path crossed, because we've actually, I guess, have known each other for several years now, but kind of basically reached out to each other. Similar stories. Me with a couple of books written on especially when my first book came out, there was really not a lot out there for people to draw on. And I, even my attorney said, man, this first book sounds nuts. And I said, well, I mean, it's the truth, and it's happening to a lot more people than me. Yeah. And at least there's somebody with some letters behind their name actually publishing about it. Never intended to be the spearhead for a movement on it, but until I did some radio shows like this and found that, lo and behold, there's a couple of 100,000 other people that are actually suffering, from this, which precipitated the second book. But Stephen has been invaluable in the fight against targeting, that's for sure.
And so I mean, your book, and you're right, your initials. I mean, my God, man, thank God for Dr. John Hall, because
Amen.
Gave some credibility when there wasn't a lot around, you know.
Well, and it is the fact of when it comes to somebody saying this technology exists. Yeah, letters behind your name means something huge, but it's also the fact of you yourself have put yourself and your reputation at risk by doing this and by coming out with this information. Even whenever I first reached out to you years ago, Dr. Hall, there was just this beautiful sense of mission that you had about getting this information out to people, despite any channels. It's the fact of people need to know that this technology exists. People need to know that this is here. People need to know that people like good Mr. Shellen up there in Canada have been a targeted individual. And some of these people are targeted physically in the way that he was, where like your history is pretty much tarnished, and anywhere that you try to go and get a job, you can't. It's everything from that to people doing horrible things because of voices that they've heard in their head.
See, and that's the thing. With 2002,
yeah.
I was alone until 2002, and that's when I found a site called Mind Control Forums. And I literally cried because I sat there. I had a girlfriend. I was hiding out or living in northern Quebec in Canada. And I basically read versions of my story and what had happened to me. And on that site, it was also talking about electronic weapons, and there was it Cheryl Welsh? She'd done a lot of research into it. In those days, there was it's growing since then, but there were patents that they had. Well, now it's simply not just patents, but in those days there were patents, and there were people talking about people getting hit with directed energy weapons.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Well, imagine I'm reading my story, but we're all and that's the thing with the label targeted individual. On some levels I don't like the word, but then I guess. It does sort of encapsulate a lot. Like it does apply to me, and it does apply also to anyone that gets directed energy. And I've had that as well. I just don't really talk about that much. But, reading the stories about almost, very similar to what I'd experienced, I just sat there and cried. I'm like, oh, my God. But I'd lived already through 7 years on my own, thinking I was the only guy that was going, or only person that was going through this.
Yeah.
And then I started researching directed energy weapons and voice to skull.
Yeah.
And it was around the same time that 9/11 happened. And the day 9/11 happened, I watched it, and I thought I was watching a Bruckheimer movie. And then I went home and I wrote a short letter to myself where I basically said, this is going to be used so that governments are able to spy on their own people and do to me or do to others what they've done to me. And then it was shortly after that the Patriot Act was introduced.
Yep.
But it's a very unpopular opinion to have because
Sure.
I didn't believe what the mainstream was telling me. Now, I tried newspapers. I was a kind of successful movie guy. No journalist would touch me. It didn't matter what. It didn't matter who I approached in mainstream. No one would touch me. They'd be interested at first, and then, no return phone call, the same nonsense, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, why is this so hush-hush? And then 2002, I read about other people that had gone through what I'd gone through, but that had also experienced the directed energies, voice to skull, all these other technologies. And we were all considered, I don't even know if we had the word yet, John, targeted individual.
Right. Yeah.
But that was mind-blowing for me to find mind control forms.
Well, and how long after founding Mind Control Forums did these stories start filtering through?
Well, they started on mind control forums, and then more and more people came out. I contacted Alex Jones in 2002. I'd done a film in 2000 that came out in 2001. Now, granted, it was a very small role, and I was actually homeless when I did it. But I did a small role in a film called Gone in 60 Seconds, which was a huge hit.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I'm still kind of a viable actor. Maybe someone will be interested to know, to hear this story, because it was so crazy, All I wanted to know was who threatened my 4-year-old son and who beat up my ex-wife. I mean, that's it.
Yeah.
And no one would touch me. No one would touch me. So finding that forum, I guess in a lot of ways, that was one of the milestones. Meeting Gunderson telling me I was on a list, and then finding mind control forums, and then more and more people after that came out, and now it's like, and I'm not saying every person that claims to be a targeted individual is absolutely a target individual.
Sure.
And you also have to understand, I mean, John and I have the advantage of being in this game for a while. People, when they're newly targeted, I mean, you are paranoid. I mean, you don't understand. If you thought the world is a certain way, and there's kindness and fairness, and the police are there for you, and if you make these assumptions, which most people do, and then suddenly you're jarred into this other reality, which is no one's got your back. There are no police that are going to help you. Everyone's calling you mentally ill. It's very difficult, and I was lucky because I used to write things down every day that I had strange things happening, break-ins, death threats. I didn't wait a week to write it down because I recognized that my mind softens after a week.
Yeah.
So I would write everything down the same day that it happened. So there'd be no chance for me, and I'm saying me, not someone else, but there'd be no chance for me to soften on what I just experienced.
Yeah, to forget details. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So I'd write things down in detail, like within an hour or 2 or 3 hours of an event happening. So I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt. So I was never someone that thought, "Oh, am I going crazy, or is this really happening?" No, I knew I wasn't going crazy, but I knew what was happening to me was absolutely crazy.
Wow.
And so many other people are going through it. When my first
have mental health issues that attach themselves to targeted individuals.
Yeah. And
but not that many.
And you were about to say something, Dr. Hall. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that it actually is so pervasive that when I wrote my first book, really it was exposing a problem that was local to what happened to my fiance in San Antonio. Mm-hmm. Police believed me. They actually did the research along with me to figure out who was stalking. And we did figure out who was stalking, and it was a PI group owned by a former FBI agent that was doing the stalking. Unfortunately, at that time, Texas had no stalking laws, and she was drugged and raped, and there was no way to prove it was them based on her say, because she was in a drugged state. So the main reason for my first book was basically to expose what I thought at the time was a local problem. And until I was on that very first episode of Coast to Coast AM, has a lot of listeners. It's a big show.
Absolutely.
And literally, my email filled up as quick as I could actually erase emails. Probably from 6,000 to 10,000.
Oh, they're known for crashing websites. I remember it back in the day frequently. Whenever a new guest would come on, they would warn them, and typically by the time 30 minutes had gone by and a couple commercial breaks, they'd come back and apologize for the fact that the website was down.
And this was all with legitimate complaints. This was people saying, this is happening in Washington, this is happening in Paris, this is happening. It turned out to be just this, just the tip of a larger iceberg, which is what prompted the second book and what prompted Stephen and I to kind of start working together on our activism, combining some of the people I know and the people I work with and the people he knows, so certainly through his art and through his history in LA. And I think hopefully going to be doing some stuff, in the film world to expose this as well. Because it's the interesting thing with this whole dilemma is I can get up in front of a group of people and I can put the research up on the board. I can tell you exactly when they started working on some of this research, how it's actually projected to actually turn out, how Edward Snowden has released documents saying, yes, everything that we've been saying is true. And now how we have victims from embassies that are being basically attacked with the exact same weaponology that we've been talking about for years happening at TIs. And people won't believe it. But if I take somebody like Stephen Sellen, who his background is in the arts world, and I take Stephen and we do something that's actually produced as a film, a drama based on a true story or based on true facts, and put it up there as maybe it's true, maybe it's not, kind of like the Amityville Horror, then I guarantee you'll get more people to believe in modern society if it's something that may be real, maybe not, than me doing a documentary.
And
that's what we just did.
And it's
John just produced a film. I'll produce a film I put out, and that film it's a film. It's a feature film with actors, a story, a script, everything.
Called The Spark.
But Joe Plummer can actually relate to that and get his head around that much easier than us coming out in a radio show or a YouTube video and saying it's going on.
Well, yeah, and that's just it. Like I myself am an audio video technician. I'm normally the guy on the other side of your presentations there, John. Whenever you're clicking through slides, I'm the guy making sure it's going up on screen. So I sit through a lot of these presentations. I sit through a lot of hacker conventions. I sit through a lot of black hat conventions, stuff like that. And just to know, things like Edward Snowden, like you said, that came out 7 years ago now almost. And
how quickly people forget.
The fact that was just kind of put by the wayside, like Stephen just said, forgotten. People forget that was a fact. It wasn't a conspiracy theory. That was a fact. That was a real thing. You can sit up there with PowerPoints and show people the active resonance technology that can show people or let people hear a banana ad in their skull whenever they step in front of a display for bananas. And this stuff exists. It's used in stores in other parts of the world, not necessarily here. But the studies have been done. It's shown this technology is real. To deny it is a little farcical in and of itself, especially whenever you're talking about 5G technology. Austin is going to be a test bed for 5G technology. That in and of itself is a little disturbing because the antennas themselves are in so much closer proximity to us. They are not on huge towers. They're able to penetrate through buildings, all kinds of stuff. And whenever you marry that with the fact that I sat and watched the live feed, I think I even shared it on our Dudes and Beer page, of the Pentagon announcing the new future weapons program, Future Wars program that will be embedded here in Austin. Well, they will be marrying 500 members of military personnel with local tech companies as well as graduate technical programs in robotics, cyber technology, all kinds of stuff.
DARPA shit.
So whenever you're looking at that, and they specifically said energy weapons, magnetic weapons, that kind of stuff. And whenever you're talking about that, that's the exact technology that we're talking about, folks. Magnetic resonance technology.
Possible deniability, though.
Oh, sure.
Most people. It's you know what it's very similar to? It's like exposing ritual abuse. No one really wants to know, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I've got
willful
both
ignorance.
of those things that I'm an advocate for, and they're both really hard for the average person to stomach. And I understand that, but things that have been done, it's so far out of the normal Joe Plummer's frame of reference that I understand. They just basically don't want to believe it.
Right.
And even though you keep coming up every 7 years with more things that say, look at this, look, this proves, this here, look. No, they prefer. And obviously the bad guys and whoever has designed it all and put it together, whether it's Nazi, paperclip, whatever it is, right? They know that the average person just doesn't want to know.
Yeah.
They don't want their little suburban world to be invaded by this, and they don't want to even accept that it might be possible.
Well, and the major media goes along with it, because if you notice, after these Cuban diplomats came forward that they were being attacked, immediately there were 3 articles in Psychology Today saying that this was group delusional disorder.
Yeah.
That there's no such weaponry that can attack the brain like this. I mean, the apologists came out immediately calling it psychological. 2 different embassies, everyone plus some non-embassy employees and visitors to Cuba who were in a hotel nearby also were complaining of being victimized. But Psychology Today jumps right on the bandwagon calling
John,
it
I hate to
delusional.
interrupt, but I just got to say this. So John and I were talking to some producers in L.A., the one guy in particular. Remember that guy?
Yeah.
And he wanted to, I think, who was it, Kim? The guy in L.A., the producer that was talking to me. And John put me in touch with him. Anyway, these guys wanted to do a documentary on targeted individual, right? All forms of it.
Okay.
And I told the kid, I'm like, look, well, where are you living out in L.A.? Oh, yeah, I know that area. Yeah, that's cool. Oh, you're from Long Island, and I warmed him up and stuff, and I was friendly with him and everything. And he was very nice, in the beginning. And it was John that put me in touch with him. Anyway, within, I warned him. I said, this is a really, don't be surprised if your superiors or someone up above you decides you're not going to do this. Don't be heartbroken if this gets kiboshed, basically.
Sure.
Right? And while we're talking to this guy, his brother had died, and I don't know whether that was something weird or not. I really don't know. But I know that right around that same time, the New York Times came out with a scathing article on targeted individuals, and you were mentioned in it. Do you remember that, John?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Complete hit job. But see, as soon as there might be something coming out in terms of the mainstream, they're going to send in their creepy soldiers and their artillery, and they're going to write like Washington Post, New York Times, one of these newspapers is just going to just completely kibosh it, call it crazy. And really, that's their only defense at this point. It's just calling people like us crazy.
Yeah.
Because they really don't have anything else. I've never been diagnosed with a mental illness. I probably have a form of post-trauma, according to one therapist. I've been to psychiatrists. I was fortunate because she didn't think I was crazy. She said she didn't understand, but she didn't disbelieve me. But that's because I didn't use a phone, and I certainly
That's a good psychiatrist,
email.
I say.
Yeah. She was at the Screen Actors Guild Mental Health Clinic.
Oh, wow.
I think it was on La Brea or La Cienega, and I'd already learned that all my phones were, were not trustworthy. So what I did is I drove there, and I went in the waiting room, and I asked to speak to the psychiatrist, and I sat in the waiting room, and I got this beautiful, lovely woman, and I went in her office, and I actually, I think I broke down into tears in her office. And this is about 97, maybe. Yeah, 97, 98. I told her what I'd gone through. I told her everything. I was completely willing to, get locked up. I didn't care. I'd lost everything at that point.
Sure.
I told her the absolute truth. And she was, she was actually beautiful. I wish I knew what her name was, because I'd love to send her a thank you now. But she understood I wasn't nuts, not crazy, certainly not making up a story. What would be the point? I'm certainly not doing it for fame. I was a movie actor, for crying out loud. Why would I make up a story that makes me appear insane? That seriously doesn't make any sense, And she was really gracious and beautiful, and that was another big. Yeah, her, Gunderson, and then the mind control forms. I only had those 3 for the first 7-8 years, and then
Discovery,
wrote the book.
Discovery Channel did do one episode of a show that they were going to do about targeting. I was in it, and it was called The United States of Paranoia.
Yep.
And they got one episode filmed and in the can. They were planning on doing a whole season, but the government banned it from being shown in the United States.
Yeah.
About a year ago, I had a girl from Helsinki, Finland, send me a tape. She goes, "Well, it's airing on Discovery in Europe."
Nice.
So they are airing it there, but they're not airing it here. So, but if for anybody who wants to learn a little bit more about it, if you want to Google United States of Paranoia.
It's interesting because there was a series years ago, and I'm trying to remember the name of it. I want to say it was like...
was it Brad Meltzer? No.
No, it wasn't Brad Meltzer. It was a security specialist, and it was basically how to disappear off the grid. And it was like, the whole premise was, okay, so everything's gone down and you need to disappear. Like this is how you go about erasing your digital footprint. Like this is how you go about expunging yourself and getting yourself completely off the grid. And it was supposed to be like this whole series, and there was one episode, and that was it.
That was it.
Yeah. But it was wild.
That's
it was
certainly
the
gonna
fact
draw
of like,
attention.
sure, you're going to stay in motels,
Right.
not hotels, but you're going to bring your own sleeping bag.
Right.
You aren't going to sleep in the bed, because if you sleep in the bed, you're going to leave trace DNA behind. You're going to leave hairs and stuff like that. You want to sleep in like a mummy, like a mummy style,
Franklin
like
cover-up.
The Franklin cover-up. Yeah.
On the Franklin cover-up.
Oh.
John DeCamp book.
The Franklin bank scandal.
Before he died.
Yeah.
John DeCamp wrote a book on the Franklin scandal, and it was about trafficking kids to the White House.
Yep.
And it was another one of these things that was supposed to air, and it got completely kiboshed. It still floats around us.
Is it that the conspiracy of silence? Conspiracy of silence?
Yeah, that's it. He got it. Yeah, good one. That's it.
Yeah, and these things are out there.
The way to keep Americans' minds off of it is just keep the football games going, keep all the bullshit in the press going, where it's about Stormy Daniels and or really petty political things, or like our intelligence community actually trying to sway an election. But you keep the public busy watching stuff like that. In Canada, the quickest way to get the government to kind of act on this would be to cut off the poutine. If you just cut the poutine off, where you can't get any poutine unless you acknowledge that this exists.
Action will be taken.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah.
No more Molson until we get this figured out.
We'll be marching in the street.
You damn well you'll get a reaction then. Yeah.
Well, and it's amazing to sit here and even be able to somewhat laugh at it, and somewhat laugh at kind of the outlandishness of the concept, but the fact that this actually exists, the fact that this happens,
right.
The fact that people are actively trafficked in these circles, the fact that people, not just like Stephen Shellen here, have been threatened by certain circles, but other actors in Hollywood. There have been more than one whistleblower.
Oh, yeah.
Corey Feldman himself coming out and saying stuff for years.
Right.
And it wasn't until the Harvey Weinstein stuff came out that people really kind of started paying attention.
Or even more recent is that Isaac Cappy that's come out. And I think, Stephen, you probably are familiar with Isaac, right?
Yeah, I'm familiar with Isaac because Fiona Barnett's a personal friend of mine. And she's the woman that almost single-handedly brought down the Australian government.
Yeah.
And Fiona phoned me about, Kim, 3 weeks ago? Anyway, she phoned me, I think, 3 or 4 weeks ago and said, I've got a new statement. I want to release my statement. And I went, oh, Fiona, thank God you're back with us, because she was in hiding for a while. She was frightened for her life.
Sure.
So she sent me her statement, and then I put that up, and then someone sent that off to this Cappy guy who just kind of emerged 3 weeks ago.
Right.
Yep.
I'm a little bit, to be honest, leery of Cappy. I think his intentions are good. I really do. But, this is a very serious matter. satanic ritual abuse and programming and MK Ultra, and I think much of the targeting individual stuff is an extension.
Right.
Absolutely, it's the same gang that did MK Ultra, and they're the ones that are, because inside the TI community, not everyone was a doctor or a whistleblower like John or a movie actor like me. There's housewives in Oklahoma that have absolutely no idea why they're targeted, and I talk to a lot of these people almost every day, and these people are just like living simple lives in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Wow.
And they suddenly find themselves getting hit with directed energy weapons,
right.
having the flyovers, having the cars follow them, having all this gang stalking activity. It's like, she's a housewife in Tulsa. Like, what the hell? Like,
right.
Yeah.
Why would they bother with her?
Yeah, what's the motivation behind that?
It's got to be experimentation also.
That's what I was thinking, experimentation.
They're not just going to do this and not keep records. They're going to keep, like, this whole thing. I mean, when 5G is rolled out, I mean, I don't want to act paranoid or frighten anyone, but,
no.
Man, like, whatever they've done to individuals up to this point,
right.
5G is going to get rolled out soon.
Oh, yeah.
That means every person on the planet that's under a 5G grid potentially can be a targeted individual if they choose to.
I think the real issue isn't even the fact that you're under the grid; it's the fact that you're within it.
Right.
Because with 5G, like, it's made to penetrate building. It's made to be like easily close to like 80% closer to the ground.
What the hell is that going to do to my pituitary gland?
Than what a 4G signal is supposed to? Well, and there are some amazing studies coming out. There's a huge article that just came out talking about the danger of blue screen light. Mm-hmm. To our eyes, to our brain, to the way that we think, to the way that we rest. People don't even...
That's just it. You see, this is the thing with the voice to skull. And I'll say this quickly. John, are you still there?
He's still here with us. Otherwise, you would not be here with us.
Oh, that's true.
John is our conduit this evening.
Now John laughs.
I know a woman on the west coast of Canada. She's a therapist, a clinical therapist. She's a psychology major, graduated. She's a therapist, right? And unfortunately, she became targeted. She wrote a book, and she reached out to me, or maybe I reached out to her actually a couple of years ago. Anyway, she is just the sweetest, nicest. She's my age, but she's sort of like my little auntie, you know. She's like everybody, whatever anyone would want for an aunt. She's that aunt that makes you tea and, you know, brings you a little shawl if you're cold. Are you sure you're not cold? You know, she's just this really great, really just a lovely, great person. So I kind of became friends with her, and at one point she claimed she had some guy with some money, and he wanted to turn her book into a screenplay. And I said, well, yeah, of course I'll do it. Well, the guy never did it. He never, you know, and I'm sorry, I'm sort of done with doing everything for free.
Sure.
So I didn't want to write this screenplay based on her book for free. And it's a very convoluted, her book's intense because it covers every form of gang stalking, voice to skull, like every form of targeting you can imagine, right? It's called No Ordinary Stalking. And she calls herself T.I. June, but her real name is Mary. Anyway, I'm getting to a point here. She phones me about 3-4 months ago. Oh, no, sorry. She sends me a message. Call me. And this is 3 or 4 months ago. And I'm like, okay, well, yeah, I'll call you now. So I call her. She tells me on the phone, she says, I woke up this morning and I absolutely hated you. I wanted vengeance against you.
Oh, wow.
I wanted to destroy you. And I'm like, okay. Do you know why? You know? And she goes, it took me an hour and a half to 2 hours to be alone here. She lives on like a little cabin on the west coast off of Vancouver on some island. She goes, I went through you and me, our relationship, every time we've spoken. You've never said anything hurtful to me. You've never tried to steal from me, hurt me, maliciously do anything to me. She said, I realized this feeling I woke up with, which I've never written about in this big book I've written about it, targeting. She said, I woke up with these feelings. These feelings were not coming from me.
Oh, wow.
I knew it.
Okay, so that's going to be hard to digest maybe tonight. And it was hard for me to even digest when she told me. But what if? I mean, I guess you could say, well, maybe it's demonic. Maybe it's demonic. But what if there is technology out there that can affect how you feel about other people? In other words, so if the 5G's rolled out, you could effectively make, 200 people in the street just suddenly turn on 20 people or 100 other people. And those people won't even know why they want to beat the crap out of these other people.
Like a critical mass
and
for no
it's all
reason.
being given to, those feelings are being given to them.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what to make of that thing that she told me. All I know is she covers everything in her book. And she's the one that told me I woke up hating your guts.
For no good reason.
Wanting vengeance against you.
Yeah.
And the scary thing with that story is, what if they can do that with her and her feelings with him? What are they going to do with the mass population when it comes election time?
Yeah.
Anything they want.
Yeah.
And that's why if Trump legitimately got in, and I kind of want to believe he did, because I was fighting for him, because I certainly didn't want Hillary Clinton. It's really frightful. If 5G is introduced, target individuals. What if we, with the exception of some whistleblowers, and I consider you a whistleblower because of you fighting for your girlfriend, John.
Absolutely.
But for the average person, the experimentation on people, like the woman in Tulsa, Oklahoma, who's never really hurt anyone or done anything. So what if this whole thing is this experimental project, and there has to be an element of that to all of this?
Right.
It's like, did they selectively choose the people they were going to do MK Ultra on? I don't think so.
Well, number one, I think it really takes the mentality of, you have to believe that a government is willing to do something large in scoping like that. A prime example is we used to have a young gentleman on this podcast who at one point vehemently denied on air that at any point did the United States government round up every single Japanese American and put them in an internment camp.
Oh, I remember that one, yeah.
And I was like, no. They did that. Every single one of them.
Yeah,
they went out and they put them in a camp. No, dude, no. Like that didn't happen. That couldn't happen.
Why? Because you didn't hear about it?
I had to know. It was pretty good common knowledge.
I mean for him, yeah. He was a little bit of a younger crowd.
So it was one of those here's the fact.
Right.
Here it is. It happened. They were willing to do it. Our government, like you said, was willing in the province of Canada to go out and carry out experiments, and that's where most of the experiments that you hear about, where they actually put stuff into water supplies and tested stuff on thousands of people at a time.
Right.
That's where most of those came from, was from Canada.
Right.
That the whole geoengineering thing happened at this small town that we visited, and we did I painted a van to bring awareness to it about geoengineering and chemtrails.
Yeah.
And we visited that town, Escondido.
Oh wow.
Ontario. There's a town where they did the whole town. They were spraying the whole town.
Yep.
Espanola, Ontario. Of course, the locals had no idea. Yeah, researchers from all.
They parked their car.
Right, didn't know where they parked their car. These people are like wandering around. The animals are dying, and then they find out that they're getting sprayed. And then they had these, city council meetings and everything. And finally, it was determined. Oh, it's the U.S. military doing it to us.
Yeah, it's our friendly neighbors.
Doing it. It's like, come on, Canada always passes the buck if you were the big bad guys in the South, right? Oh, it's the Americans that have done this to us. Canada's so far up the U.S.'s evil guys' ass. It's pathetic. Like, and honestly, man,
I've spoken with Paul Hellyer, and
that you can run off to Canada and everything's great and you're going to be safe.
Yeah,
it's going to be worse up here.
Yeah, I've personally spoken with Paul Hellyer before, who is of course former defense minister in Canada.
That speaks of UFOs.
And yeah, he was one of the first people to really come out and say like, no, these exist. Like there are agreements made with them. I'm the former minister of defense, and I'm here to tell you it exists. And even he would say the exact same thing, that they are so far entrenched in what is going on with the U.S. federal government that they aren't going to do anything to dismiss any of that disinformation that they are pumping out. And
then I guess globally you're dealing with Luciferian Zionists. I mean,
right?
Like who controls the U.S.? Well, and then you talk about spy agencies like Mossad, CIA, CSIS in Canada, MI6. I mean, aren't they all the same?
Yeah.
Aren't they pretty much all working
different
for
countries,
the same
shit?
Yeah, they don't have countries, civilians of certain countries. They don't have their interests in mind.
Right.
So, I mean, that's the big lie that we believe that, right?
And they also have agreements between all of those countries to spy on each other.
Well, and that was a really good point that you just made there, Doctor. Make it for us one more time.
There's been agreements made between Canada, England, the United States, and Australia to get around the rules and the laws of privacy, where Canada spies on the U.S. and then shares its information with the U.S.
Right.
U.S. spies on Canada, Australia spies on England. Everybody spies on each other, and then the information is shared. That way,
isn't that a crazy world?
That was going on prior to 9/11. I think since 9/11, there's been new laws where you're completely allowed to spy on your own citizens, right?
Oh, sure.
Prior to 9/11, they had to pretend it was the Canadians spying on the Americans.
Yeah, well,
that's the Patriot Act.
We of course now have, due to the Patriot Act, we of course have FISA courts now where spectral evidence is allowed. It may as well be back to Salem witch trial times.
Yeah, exactly.
Any kind of evidence whatsoever, whether fabricated or not, whether proved or not, can secure FISA warrants to exact those kind of tolls upon people. And that is, of course, a very dangerous place for us to be in as a country, as a world, period, whenever we're having the discussion of privacy, of individualism.
At the end of the day, like I hate that expression actually, but it kind of applies here. At the end of the day, like what do you guys think? Like honestly, like you look around, you see this stuff going on. I look around, I see my own life. I'm living a pretty humble existence right now, trying to rent my film that I made. John helped me out on it. He's listed as one of the producers, and it's a great film, The Spark. But I'm trying to sort of, wash dishes, sell some art, and I've accepted my sort of, I guess, my role, if you will, in this, this later in life experience, right?
Yeah.
But like when you look at the big picture, and at the end of the day, like, well, like, how do you surmise it, or what do you think? Like, what do you think this is all about?
Steve,
like, why would the globalist elites be so evil? And like, do you draw analogies to like what the theory is on Atlantis all the people were really nice and loving, and then there was a small group that were kind of evil, and they took over and they destroyed the whole place. Like,
yeah,
honestly, like, you know, when I look at the big picture, I'll just say this. I'll preface it by saying, I just think we're in a spiritual battlefield because it's the only thing that gives me any solace.
Yeah. Steve,
nothing else makes any sense.
I'll let you field that first, and then I'll weigh in with what I think. Real quick.
I'm just gonna go with like right off top of my head. I think it's these elites. They just want total and complete control, and whether or not they're controlled by something we can't see, the public, or a higher being of some sort. I totally think a personal level of that sort, that it's complete control, like all this TI stuff, like it's experimentation for like what we were saying earlier, to get total and complete control of, that technology to, like you were saying, the masses, control the mass, and then us being that, and then the very few at the top are going to have that control.
Yeah. And
but is that a human nature? Like, how we have animals and we herd our cattle and stuff?
Oh, sure. Right. No, I mean, the quest for dominance.
Is that some default mechanism in humans that makes us
most definitely
want to control everything?
I mean, granted, not everybody has that default mechanism to want to control everything, but I think that we as humans in and of ourselves do definitely have that drive to want to control our environment, want to control our direct impact and influence upon that environment as much as possible.
And I forgot to add, in those people at the very top that are able to eventually have complete control might have the worthiness to whoever they answer to and have a worth to them.
Well, and I think really the main means of control for most people has really been advertising, and they really don't realize it. What Dr. John Hall, just to harken back to the beginning of this conversation, talking about the technology used to actively entrap a brain, the technology used to wear you down.
Well, check this out. I've spoken to people before, and I cannot get this through people's heads that I speak to, but there's a little device by Patrick Flanagan. It's called the Neurophone. And I said, I can put these electrodes on my head. It's the size of a Walkman. And without listening with my ears, I can hear the music in my head. And they're like, no, that's bullshit. I've used it. And it's $600 and you can go online and buy it.
Sure.
And he claims he made that for the government in the late 60s when he was a teen.
Yeah, well, and I would find that somewhat of a spurious claim because there's I don't
the website
really,
I'm on it right now. But
I don't really.
It works.
Sure. I mean, you can take a piezo and super glue it to a table, and that table will become a speaker. Like that's just resonant technology.
Or you can buy an audio spotlight.
Yeah.
And actually beam those voices into somebody's head from across the room.
Exactly. And I think the point I'm trying to make, Doctor, is that controlling somebody via physical means where you actively have to have touch on them isn't really isn't really the best means of control. Even the 60s, they were working with flickers and incandescent lights to put people into an entrained state, to expose them to certain cycles of the brain that would, once they got under a flickering light that is imperceptibly flickering at a different hertz rate than normal, your brain would slip into a subjective state.
Hypnotic,
suggestive state rather.
One of the most interesting things is Jose Delgado was one of the researchers in MK Ultra that was really the guy that was experimenting with brain chipping and body chipping, and he's the guy that was able to stop the charging bull with a brain chip, and he stood in front of it and pressed a button and stopped the bull. Before Delgado's death, in his last interview, when people were finally onto him, he'd kind of been discredited. He had moved to Spain. He moved back to L.A. Before his death, in an interview, and I met the man before his death, he actually said, because we had talked to him about his stymo receiver and the implant work that he did.
Yeah.
And even this would have been 85, 86, something like that. Even he said at that time that everything I did with implants is passé. He goes, they no longer need an implant. And in his terms, he said, everything I did with a receiver can now be done with broadcasting.
Yep.
And that's exactly the same thing that Michael Persinger said up at Laurentian in Canada, who did all the microwave research for the Navy. He had said 15, 20 years ago that he could control every brain on the planet using extremely low frequency waves.
Yeah.
Because the human brain is so sensitive to anything below about 10 hertz.
Like beta waves, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I'm getting to with commercials, things like that. With my study in subliminal psychology years ago, I came to find out the fact that this stuff is used all the time. Mm-hmm. The fact that our brain sees at certain frame rates, the fact that you could throw in a 30th of a second in film, and most people would not even notice it.
My girlfriend and I both in high school, we were boyfriend, girlfriend a bit in high school, and we both loved subliminal seduction.
Yes.
Where it's the ice cube that says sex.
I still have a copy of that book. And absolutely, it was used in regular advertising. It was used all over the place. And it's no different being able to, I said it whenever HD came out, and everyone was like, 120 hertz. And I was like, awesome, they'll be able to hypnotize your brain twice as fast. And they were like, what? I'm like, you do realize what...
I think our only firewall against this is a belief in... and it's a belief in Christ and God. I don't know what else the option is.
I mean, quite honestly, the only solution is literally to remove yourself from the loop. If you don't like it, don't watch broadcast television. Don't watch the commercials that are giving you the subtle suggestions.
The trouble is, when you go out in public, every time you go out to your job, you go out in public, you go to the supermarket. When 5G's rolled out,
it's like they live.
Almost everyone else is going to be under the influence, right?
Yeah.
It's not working too well on me because I still don't want my pillow.
Eventually, you're going to get like gang stalked and harassed, just like people like me. But you're just a guy that's trying to stay off the grid, trying to stay away from the 5G, and it's like everyone else is going to be, and they're not going to question their motives. They're going to be given a thought or a feeling, and they're not going to question where that thought or feeling came from.
Yeah.
So the only solution I have that I can think of, honestly, and I know it sounds corny, but it's like if you don't believe in God, if you don't have some hope in some ultimate power that
something
has
greater
control
than
over
yourself,
this, and Satan's got the domain of this world. I mean, that's something that, I think most religions basically say the same thing. Satan's got control of the air. Satan's got control of the earth, right? But if you don't believe that this is somehow that you have something, you have to have some, even the mustard seed of faith can kind of pull you out of it. Because believe me, I was New Age, man. I never believed in God, really. I mean, I was certainly not, I was certainly not some like diehard Christian or anything like that growing up. My sister was a part of the Satanic Church, and and after 23 years, honestly, and it seems like, man, we're just doing battle. We're down here on the spiritual world, the warfare, and it's almost like Revelations all over again. Like maybe this will be a new chapter in the Bible. I don't know,
Yeah. Well,
it's an incredible time to be alive. I think that maybe on the upside, we can all be sort of proud that we can all be sort of somehow, I don't know, maybe proud that we got selected to be born into this time frame.
Yeah,
maybe two exact times.
Yeah, it's an incredible time to be alive. Like, this is such a,
Well, and I think it really does.
A sheet show.
Just to take it to that spiritual realm for a second, it really does kind of come down to the concept of the Mayan prophecy that came about in 2012, and so many people really misinterpreted that. And what they don't understand is the concept. Well, I interpret it the way that the Mayans did, and the fact that the world is cyclic, and there's half day and half night within a cycle.
Sounds
and
right, yeah.
The day is the dawning of a technology. The night is the application.
Ooh,
and right now,
I got you.
when 2012 happened, that shift going into the final recorded cycle was the application of technology. We had all
of this stuff, and now it's being applied.
It was flipping into the point of, now it is time within the cycle for us to apply this technology.
Steven, that makes sense.
It's time for us to decide what we as a people are going to do with this.
Yeah.
Like collectively, the whole world over.
Now, that makes sense to me now. Yeah. Never had it put that way.
And when you look at it in that right, I mean, you can absolutely see the confluence.
But at the same time, I think I better wear a copper hat or something. Would that help? I know they say foil, but I think copper. I think I'm going to make a copper hat.
I wouldn't go that far.
I think it might be beyond the copper hat.
Yeah, I think we're way beyond the copper hat helping.
Paranoia, which I did for a while, it's an awful place to go.
Mm-hmm.
You're better off just accepting that you're this being, you're a spiritual being, and your physical body, they can get taken out anytime they want, right? Really? If they've got this much control, you can get killed anytime they want, right, John?
Yeah, so that's what I explained.
Spiritual being, and it's like, well, I'm still here.
Well, and let's
that's
get
what
into.
I explained to a lot of the victims that contact me. Is I tell them, your best defense against this. Everybody's looking for shielding. You can't walk around in an anechoic suit or a shielding suit because you're going to wind up in front of a psychiatrist. And it's the psychiatrist's visit that actually damns you more than the technology.
True.
So, I mean, really, the best way to fight this is to try to stop the communication link. If you're hearing them, don't speak back. Do your best not to communicate in thought or vocal word, and try to live your life as normally as possible, because the more you hermit yourself inside, Googling electronic harassment all day and all night, the crazier you're going to seem, and the more likely you're going to be diagnosed as crazy. You've got to force yourself to get out, interact with people normally, and force yourself to live life. And when they can't maintain that link of keeping you paranoid, eventually they just give up and they move on to the next person.
Yeah. Thank God.
Yeah, and it really is as the title of your first book says, guinea pigs, a new technology of control. It really is people with new technologies using the unwitting public as guinea pigs, whether it be to gather data metrically about opinions,
which is we were known to have done this. We've known to have done this, our country.
Well, and not just our country, and numerous countries.
Yeah.
I mean, heck, it just came out the other day that the federal government contacted Facebook to try and put a backdoor system into Facebook Messenger. Believe it or not, Facebook Messenger is one of the most secure methods of communication that you can have. It's a fully encrypted voice conversation, stuff like that.
Amazing. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, they actively wanted a backdoor to be able to tap into a tap into a Facebook voice call or Facebook video chat that was private, stuff like that.
How they respond to that one?
They have so far said no.
Yeah.
This kind of stuff is out there. It's out there constantly, and we do, like I said, it's a point of surrender where we have to give that control up. We're the ones that have to go out and buy the new cell phone with 5G. I guarantee you'd probably be able to operate with a 4G phone for at least the next 3 to 5 years after 5G comes out. It may not be the latest and greatest, folks, but.
And that's one of the things we've often wondered is the TI population. Are they the guinea pigs? Are they the experimentees for the rollout of 5G when it will be more efficient to actually target everyone at that point?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I absolutely think that's a real good possibility.
Yeah, and it's absolutely
Total control, man.
It's not too far away. The technology definitely exists, as we said earlier, with things like nanodust.
Now, wouldn't theory and logic and science say that if, let's say you're targeted, this is all like frequency, right? Is that what we're talking, frequencies?
Some of it.
Okay, so say if it's a frequency deal, that find out what frequency is affecting you, however you do that. I'm not saying I know how, and track that frequency to its location. Couldn't you do something like that?
Sure.
Yeah, we have been doing that.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
They've done it.
Yeah.
And it didn't work.
Oh no, it worked.
Done it, but they're not going to change. They're not going to admit to anything.
Yeah.
Well, then when you try to go to the police or you go to anybody to report it, then you get told, well, it's probably UHF from a radio station, or it's the power lines, or it's frequencies being emanated by the wiring in your home. And they're not going to find anybody in any agency that's going to come in and help you and go, oh yeah, man, holy shit, you're being targeted. That doesn't happen.
No help.
No, that doesn't happen. If anything, you're going to be escorted out of the police department, or maybe put in a cruiser and taken to a mental hospital.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Because we talked about these active shooters. Every one of them is complaining of mind control and that they're being targeted.
Yeah.
Some of them survive, most of them get killed. But I mean, for the most part, all of these shooters lately have complained about voices. One of them tried to turn himself into the FBI. I think in Alaska, prior to going to Florida and shooting at the airport, said that I'm being targeted, and the FBI sent him for a psych eval. He had a psych eval. Psychologist said, it sounds like he does have something going on, but it's not mental illness. And then he went down to the airport and did what he was directed to do. And those are basically programmed assassins.
Yeah, follow the voices.
We were at a point with our previous State Department that was really pushing for gun control. And if you have enough mass shootings, they were hoping that there'd be a public outcry for gun control, and there never was. And if you've noticed, other than Las Vegas, the mass shootings have kind of curtailed a little bit. The criminal shootings haven't. Chicago's as dangerous as ever.
Oh yeah.
And you don't see anybody running to Chicago to try to do anything about that. Even the African American population is asking for federal help.
There's even been a rash of shootings up in Canada as of late.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a country that
unheard of before.
Claims to have some of the best gun control around. So whenever you look at that, whenever you see these cases, an odd thing about the Las Vegas case, the Las Vegas sheriff just declared the case closed.
Oh, Lombardo.
Without any answer.
Yep. With no cause of motive.
Declared the case closed.
With no cause of motive.
You ever heard of Joint Task Force?
Yeah.
You ever heard of the Joint Task Force?
Yep.
Okay, so there's a guy in Toronto. He stayed with us for a while because he was so scared he didn't know where to go. So he came and stayed with me and Kim. And I'm so used to living in this world, I don't care, right? So I'm like, okay, come on, stay with us. They had a concussion bomb. What was it called? Our car blew up in the freeway.
Oh, wow.
But it didn't really blow up. It was like what was that called? It was like this bomb they stuck underneath his car. And we honestly thought the car had blown up. But it was just this intense noise thing. Anyway, this guy had cameras. This guy was so paranoid. He had cameras in his, in his SUV. This guy had been a computer scientist, made a lot of money. He'd also been sexually abused as a child. He used to get broken in by this Joint Task Force guy from that worked out of the American Embassy in Toronto. This guy would scopolamine him and rape him.
Oh, wow.
Now, I wouldn't have believed it, except I stayed at the guy's house. I met his Asian wife, who was from China, and the guy had like deadbolts. Like this guy, the place was like Fort Knox, right, Kim? It was unbelievable. Well, this poor guy, yeah, he was getting scopolamine and then raped, and it was all done through the Joint Task Force guy from the American embassy.
Oh, wow.
I mean, what the heck's going on? Like
The shit?
and eventually this guy, because he'd been so fractured and messed up, he eventually turned on us. But yeah, I'd never even heard of scopolamine. Scopolamine's it's from a plant in Colombia. They now have it in aerosol. If I spray this in your face, this aerosol, and I say, okay, now we're going to go to your ATM, and you're going to take out every dime you've got in your bank account, and you're going to give it to me.
Yeah, it's the zombie drug.
That'd be exactly $5.
Yeah. And there was a huge rash of that.
No, but John, you've got that also, right? And you use it for a clinical purpose when you
we used to use scopolamine in anesthesia quite a bit, and it's an anticholinergic, and they used to use it for twilight sleep and some other uses. We've kind of gotten away from it, but yeah, it is still in the DoD arsenal as far as kind of chemical weapons. Yeah.
So you can basically kind of use that to like control somebody.
Well, I mean, and there's other drugs. I mean, there's Rohypnol and GHB that are used as date rape drugs, that will also render someone without memory or give them amnesia. Where, some of the younger kids were using Rohypnol, they call them roofies. And I even had one kid come into the office that had been in a car wreck, had hurt himself pretty bad, but was on roofies and didn't even remember where his car was. So, I mean, the police had to go out looking for his vehicle because he wound up at home in somebody else's clothes and didn't remember how he got there. So, I mean, it really works as a good amnestic drug, which is what, a lot of TIs are actually have those drugs used. They'll break in and put Rohypnol in your bottled water or in your food, and it allows them to actually break in while you're there because you don't remember them being there. Matter of fact, some of the victims are even, they ring the doorbell and they let them in.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And with that in mind, it's so easy to. I guess the easiest way to put it is to socially engineer those situations. Socially engineer something where you have either control of somebody's cell phone. Or you have, control over food or beverage that's being delivered, things like that. I guess as we kind of wrap things up here, gentlemen, what are some of the things? I guess Stephen, as somebody who has experienced this, give us a few things that people can keep an eye out for to kind of recognize these in others that they may know. Perhaps.
How do you mean in other people they encounter? You mean?
Well, yeah. What are some of the typical things that if you see your friend going through them, you may know somebody that is under the process of being a TI.
Okay. Well, I guess the best. Maybe one of the best examples is that, and I'm so glad Dr. John's here, man. But one of the best examples is like schizophrenia for the most part, probably not 100% of the time, but for the most part, schizophrenia develops between your late teens and your early 20s. So if someone's in their late 30s and they're experiencing something, and it looks like and smells like schizophrenia, and everyone that seems to be around them is claiming they're paranoid and they're schizophrenic.
Yeah.
Question that, because schizophrenia doesn't generally develop in your late 30s, right? Also, if someone's talking about being followed and harassed and tracked, or they're getting thoughts in their head, or they don't think these voices are coming from them, yeah, it's so easy to sort of assume, well, maybe they're crazy. And you know what? There's a chance they might be.
Sure.
But give them the benefit of the doubt and at least ask, well, how frequently is this happening?
Yeah.
And what is this happening about? And ask them questions that sort of, you'll get information that you'll be able to ascertain whether it's something they're delusional about, or they may be real about. And and there are people that are claiming to be targeted individuals that are kooky because it fits their narrative. Yeah. So within the TI community, you've also got some nutty people, and not that many, and then you've also got infiltrators and perps, right? So imagine what a pile of crap this is. The TI community is full of real TIs, and then you've got people that look like or think they're experiencing this TI stuff, but they're really mentally ill. And then on top of that, you've got infiltrators. Can you imagine trying to sort through that?
Right.
That's an insane job.
That's got to be difficult.
Exactly.
It's almost as insane as trying to sort through the truth community in the alternative news.
Yeah.
Quite honestly, I'm so disappointed with a lot of the truth community.
Yeah. And, it really does come down to
trust, right? You're telling the truth.
It really does come down to the fact also often in our society of listen to these people. Whenever they come to you with a story like that, don't just dismiss them, folks. Dr. John Hall, what would your advice be to people who think that they may be a targeted individual or think that they may know a targeted individual?
Focus on the stalking. That's the one thing you can prove, and it's easy to do. Because it always, almost in every single victim, it starts with physical stalking. Once they've got enough biometric parameters on you and you're basically linked into the system, they don't have to stalk you anymore. From that point on, it's all done electronically, and that's very difficult to prove.
Yeah.
So when it first starts happening, or somebody or a loved one voices that to you, follow them yourself or hire somebody that's not connected to follow them. You'll find out pretty quickly if they're being followed. It'll give you a chance to get some license plate numbers and probably find out what private investigative group that's been contracted by the government is actually doing it to you in that town.
Wow.
That's some golden advice there.
That is some absolute beautiful advice. On that note, thank you so much for joining us this evening. To special guest Stephen Shellen, first time for joining us. Tell everybody where they can go to find out information about the movie The Spark, Stephen.
Yeah, go to hell, everybody.
A man of promotion. I love it.
I had a feeling that was coming.
That's classic.
You can go to my website, www.stephenschellenberger.com.
Fantastic.
Oh, I love it.
Just rent the damn thing. You won't be disappointed. John's one of my producers.
Can I Netflix and chill with it?
It's a great film.
Well, and, on that note, Dr. John Hall, once again.
Wait, I got one more note before you leave.
Go ahead.
My stepdaughter's 8 months pregnant, and she's arguing with her mom right now on Facebook about vaccines. Ooh. And we're trying to discourage her from doing the vaccine thing. I want to ask Dr. John, what do you think?
I think you need to pick and choose. There are some vaccines that I think are probably worthwhile to have. I personally don't get the flu vaccine and all these coming down the pike every day, but there are a handful of them. The key to it is to not let them give them all at once. And actually, one of the big misnomers is that the Amish don't get vaccines. The Amish do get vaccines. They just pick the ones that they allow, and they don't give them all at once. They space them out. When you get a bunch of...
Can you send me a list of the good vaccines?
Yeah, I will.
Do you mind?
Sure, I'll do it.
I mean, we're scared crapless right now because Danny's close to having the baby.
Yeah.
And it's like she's now fighting that oh, everyone gets vaccinated. And we're like, no, you got to be really careful.
Well, and
so we don't know what to tell her.
I would definitely tend to agree with Dr. Hall on that. Every show that I ever worked on where we had people talking about it, the main advice was do everything that you can to spread those vaccines out. Make sure that you have at least a few days between dosages of vaccine to be able to observe the child.
Right.
Make sure that there are no adverse reactions, that kind of stuff. And if it really does depend a lot on the primary care physician of the child as to what they're going to do on that realm. I would definitely say have her start checking into that with her doctor immediately and find a doctor that is down with that course of treatment.
I think it's a doctor that's leaning on her, though, to get vaccinated.
Sure.
Of course,
It's if it's the fact of they're like, no, we need to inject them with like 6 vaccines at the same time.
Nah.
You really need to try to explore another doctor.
That's what we're trying to fight right now.
Yeah.
That's what I don't want.
And I vaccinated my child, but it was definitely the fact of
smallpox, and the vaccinations have served a purpose.
Absolutely.
I don't want my grandson being vaccinated with a bunch of mercury and stuff.
Exactly.
Not just that, it's the fact of it does you no good, it does your body no good to get like 6 different vaccinations at one time and try to fight all of that off. You cannot tell what your body could be having an adverse reaction to at that point.
Right.
So the staged vaccination.
And I think really a person taking proper measurements to be safe shouldn't be a doctor shouldn't take that disrespectful. It's just somebody knowing their stuff and knowing, hey, we want to be safe.
Well, and requesting
no disrespect, you know what I mean? Like
requesting a different course of treatment. I'm not denying your course of treatment and your desire to vaccinate my baby.
Right.
I'm just curious as to why they all have to be doled out like within the next 30 minutes.
Because a doctor or something might say, oh.
I'm sorry, you guys. It just came through on Facebook, so I'm like, oh my gosh,
This is Dr. Jordan over here.
Hey, and I'm like, no, wait a second.
I've got a 1-year-old myself, and that was one of the things that my wife and I had a very long discussion about before our baby was born, and something that we definitely discussed with our primary care physician, all that kind of stuff. So that is a great conversation for her to start having with whoever her primary care for her child would be.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jordan.
Okay, guys. Thanks so much. That's good. All right.
Yeah.
Boy, I really derailed it, didn't I? Jeez.
And
oh, man.
Dr. John,
what do you think about her?
Well, absolutely. There's no reason not to be.
I'm glad you brought that up on air. That was awesome.
Just remember the fact that people have been having babies for thousands of years and will continue to do so.
Yeah.
And we're here still, huh?
That's right. We're still here. We're still here. So on that note, Dr. John Hall, thank you so much for joining us. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us. Dr. John, please tell everybody where they can go one more time to find out more about stem cell orthopedic treatment, as well as your books, Guinea Pigs, Technology of Control, and A New Breed, Satellite Terrorism.
Both those books can be found at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, the Facebook page for Guinea Pigs Technologies of Control, and website for Stem Cell Orthopedic Institute of Texas if you're interested in regenerative medicine. So.
Fantastic. Gentlemen, please do hold the line. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us as always.
Yes,
this has been a great conversation.
You guys are awesome.
Until next time, everybody, please do make sure to check us out on dudesandbeer.com. Please do make sure to check out the all-new Dudes and Beer Fantasy Football podcast for all of you who are into that.
Yeah.
Matthew McPeak is doing a great job with that.
You guys need to get in on it.
We had a request from numerous listeners why we didn't do anything regarding sports, and I was like, well, I got people that are all about it, so we did it. Go check it out. Check us out on the HC Universal Network and the network app. Until next time, everybody, if you can't be good.
Thanks, Dr.
Thanks
John.
for listening to this episode of the Dudes and Beer Podcast. To listen to our audio streams or chat with us live, download the official Dudes and Beer app for Android and iDevices, available on Google Play and iTunes markets. For more episodes, content, and information, visit us online at dudesandbeer.com. You can also find our episodes on Breach.tv, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, SoundCloud, iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast service. Dudes and Beer is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. For more about our sponsors and other podcasts on this network, visit hcuniversalnetwork.com. Thanks for listening, everybody, and until next time, drink responsibly.